So good to be back in the chair today, actually. I've been out of the chair for like a week or two. I haven't been feeling well, so it's really good to be back and with someone who I now consider a friend. We have a lot of mutual friends before, and we've been speaking. Adam Goldman, thank you so much for coming on Untold Stories. And I am your host, Charlie Shrem. You are listening and watching Untold Stories, where twice a week we get to dive deep with some of crypto's coolest people, the brightest crayons in the box, and the sharpest tools in the shed to really understand where we're going. And to really understand where we're going, we have to know where we're coming from. By the way, I think there's another podcast that stole that ad from me. That little thing that I made up about like how we have to know where we're coming from to know where we're going. I heard an NPR podcast, literally word for word. I'm going to find out who you are, or I'm going to take your lines. But Adam Goldman, thank you so much for coming on Untold Stories today. I love it. How's your day going?
Awesome. Charlie, thanks for having me on. As you sort of mentioned as well, it's great to be on and also, considering you as one of my crypto heroes, sort of growing up in my crypto journey. I also consider you a good friend as well. And I'm very happy to be on and shoot the shit with you.
Yeah, awesome. This is like, and that's like the perfect way to describe. It always like starts off shooting the ship, but then it goes into these like deeper conversations. Adam, you're the co-founder of BitBUY.ca, and I'm going to emphasize the CA because I like to call you. Well, I privately would talk to our mutual friends as you're the king of Canadian crypto, and we're going to talk about today why some of the most important projects have started in Canada, why the socioeconomic and like mental psyche that Canadians have grown up with have really that follow the ethos of crypto. In that I feel like crypto folk, we believe that we have a moral obligation to leave the world in a better place, and there's like a social layer that we believe we need to have. And the only way to do that is not by government, but more of like giving people the tools and the software and the level playing field to be able to make their wealth or put fat food on their table and do all these different things. So there's that common thread. Whereas I feel like a lot of people that I talk to, unfortunately, like where I grew up in New York, and like it's more of like all or nothing. It's for ourselves, and we're gonna push forward, and we're gonna leave people behind. And I don't really like that, and it's not really like a good way to live.
Yeah, definitely that is certainly in line with a lot of ethos that Canada can have or Canadians have. We take great pride up here in many national things we do, whether it's our claim to the crown on being the best hockey players in the world, or other notable endeavors that have come out of the country. Specifically as it relates to crypto, I think it kind of begins before that with technology. And Canada's always been a hub for some groundbreaking and some world breaking technologies all the way back to the 50s, with nuclear reactor technology, and up through the 60s and 70s with some military technologies. And then, of course, my favorite was a globally known company called Nortel Networks, which managed to become the global leader in telecommunications networks, rails, technologies, and things like that. So there's definitely
And then
a
Ethereum
history.
too.
Yeah, and then so yeah, that's sort of where I end that. And I always love to reiterate that Toronto and Canada is the birthplace of Ethereum. And so that's definitely one of the claims to fame that actually a lot of Canadians from the early days will tell you. Canada initially in the early days of crypto was seen as one of the global blockchain crypto startup hubs in the world. Our proximity to the United States was great, but of course, being in a different jurisdiction gave us a little bit more freedom, if you will, more centered on the lack of guidance and the sort of new technology that was learning to be discovered by regulators, governments, banks, etc. But yeah, I would say Canada has always had that sort of technological fostering ability up here, and it's heavily influenced by our brothers and sisters in the South.
Why do you think that is in some countries the way not just regulators, but all government institutions will look at an industry or technology could be so fundamentally different than other countries?
I think maybe it probably could be best classified as asking the question, who benefits, right? And so I think when that question is asked, depending on how free said nation is, I think is where the concerns will be highlighted. And it's kind of interesting you bring that up. I think back to another Canadian story where that became an issue pre-crypto is, BlackBerry at one point was the global leader in smartphone communications and BBM Messenger, and it was just everywhere around the world. And so, of course, other nations around the world wanted to deploy this at the government levels, at the military levels, et cetera. And when BlackBerry went out to these countries, a lot of them had these caveats and restrictions that said, hey, can you effectively violate this right that you don't violate in North America for us because we have XYZ concern, we have XYZ risk, we
Sure.
have concern over who benefits. So yeah, I would definitely say that's one of the top things, and really it sort of boils down to how free we are, right? So in North America, land of the free, home of the brave, we like to build and create, and I think obviously from that perspective, everybody in crypto who's been in the United States or North America or any of those Western worlds has benefited positively from being able to not be bothered or not be hindered while trying to pilot something in this new space.
Well, yeah, it shouldn't be as a surprise to anyone that crypto really like not say crypto, but like Bitcoin itself and or like social crypto,
Hmm.
really was founded in Canada because and I never really thought about this way that Canada has always been this warrior for technology, social good. If you look at just the war with the firing shots of Huawei, it was Canada, not the US who did it. You look at
Sure.
the first laws about privacy and cookies, and it was another big one. It was too is something to do with advertising and the internet and how our technology is encrypted and everything. It started on a Canada federal law.
Hmm.
So when does that kind of like go back? When do you think that started?
I think basically, and interestingly enough, back to sort of asking the question about it, it's kind of flippy floppy when it comes to who's going to follow suit between Canada and the United States. And there's many examples to which the United States will take a lead and Canada will follow, and then vice versa, of course, which is what you're mentioning.
Yeah.
So I think, just in terms of maybe statistical figures, for example, the size of the market, the size of the landscape, the size of the government, and being the size of, let's say, one United State, it certainly does give off the ability to move a little bit more nimble in a nimble fashion or be a little bit more agile. And so I would say because we had a lot of like when you look at the population of Canada, most um, dense centers are centered around very close proximity to the border with the United States. So in BC, in Quebec,
Yeah,
in
there's a lot of
Ontario as well. Yeah, so
cultural overlap too.
correct. And so I would say that there's such heavy cross influence that while that discussion had been debated over many states in the United States and had gone up through various Supreme Court cases in certain instances regarding privacy and reasonable expectations of privacy, I think that sort of historical landscape allowed Canadians to sort of look at it and go, you know what? They haven't figured these things out, but they've effectively started to ask all the questions that we need to answer. And so, with respect to privacy and encryption and sort of our forward thinking approach up here in Canada, I would say a lot of it is a culmination of the information garnered from south of the border, and then simply sort of adjusting it and putting it in line with sort of values of Canada and the Charter rights and freedoms, the Bill of Rights, and things like that that protect individual liberties for Canadians up here, and our thoughts in our head were very important, and I think you can see that in the
Yeah, of
ways.
course.
For example, our political landscape is slightly different than the United States,
It's very different than the United States. It's like
for good or for good or for worse.
it's sometimes better, sometimes worse, but sometimes, you'll look up. I remember there was that when like Obama won the presidency, everyone was like, "I'm moving to Canada" or something like that. I forgot the stupidity, but you have started multiple startups over the course of a decade, and a lot of it's related like IT consulting and building financial and technological rails. And you started BitBy, and BitBy has become the leading Canadian digital currency trading platform and brokerage. You offer deep liquidity across like 10 spot trading markets through your OTC trading desk. And then I also want to talk to you about something a little bit further about your Knox's custody and your one-to-one deposit insurance, because you have a quote here. You said you want BitBy to be the world's first platform to find a way to keep the full value of its Bitcoin cold storage holdings insured, which is a very hard thing to do. You know what? Why don't we just jump off into that? Like, explain to me
Sure.
your thinking on that.
Sure. So we had a relationship with this company out of Canada, a startup by the name of Knox, who, interestingly enough, had at the time, I believe, the largest seed round raise in Canadian startup history. At the time, it was something
Oh
like
wow.
7.5 or 8 million bucks, led by Fidelity, and they had a mission to go out and build proprietary HSM technology along with processes and controls that would satisfy the top insurers of the world. So where they're asking, what's my risk exposure on these crypto assets? I don't understand. I can't safeguard them. X, Y, Z. Knox basically set out to build an end-to-end solution that would satisfy the box, but not from a on paper perspective. There is an actual super proprietary sort of process that is in conjunction with the technology they developed that basically keeps these assets secure. So what that enabled them to do was offer their clients who custody at Knox one-to-one insurance while being title on said insurance policy. So it's not an insurance policy for Knox. It's not like a BitGo sort of pooled Lloyd's of London basket. It is directly one-to-one, and of the assets held under their custody. And they've spent probably the better half of 2.5 to 3 years really trying to iron out the technical elements of why that solution is able to satisfy the risk requirement of a large insurer. And a lot of it has to do with the talent that exists within inside Knox. There's a deep set of engineers and high level math developers who are able to basically build this technology. And so when it came to market, I mean, it was sort of a no brainer for us. We're a Canadian company. They were Canadian custodian, assets being up here in the correct jurisdiction. And then, of course, having that covenant was definitely a world first. And we were extremely happy to roll that out. And we also did not, um, you know, pass up any of those costs to our customers. We felt, in fact, that that would be something that we'd be more than willing to pay for, so that Canadian customers would feel comfortable when they're storing assets on BitBuy, which is not typically the best practice, of course. Be your own bank, not your
Sure.
keys, not your coins, etc. But when you get to this sort of enterprise level, there's really amazing solutions like Knox. So yeah, we were extremely happy to onboard with Knox, and then of course safeguard client crypto assets,
That's
Bitcoin
so cool.
specifically. Yeah,
The words Bitcoin and OTC have been together hand in hand since the early days of time, but back history of time. No, but seriously, but most people don't know what OTC is. It stands for over the counter trading. In
sure.
fact, um, another fun fact, the first Bitcoin related IRC chat rooms that were created were Bitcoin Dev, and Bitcoin OTC.
Hmm.
Because here, for the first time in the history of the world as we know it, you have a digital scarce finality where you have to deliver the actual asset over the internet and not a derivative of or a IOU of or a product of or a representation of or a security of. You are delivering the actual asset. So from the beginning, OTC has been the backbone of our industry. I remember laying in bed running BitInstant when we were doing 20, 30% of the volume, having to trade liquidity. Remember, we're trading the actual asset. I'm trading liquidity with the CEO of BitPay, Bitfinex, and some of the others. And here, these are the top companies that are funding the retail whole crypto scene. And we're sitting and we're swapping liquidity because that's how you had to do it back then. There was no custodial
Back end,
solutions. There's no back end broker dealer
sure.
support. There was none of this. We had to custody and supply our own liquidity in real time, and it was impossible. Till today, OTC is not only it's bigger. It's known now as one of the most important backbones of our industry. You guys are constantly seeked out for comment on market-related conversations. Almost every company in the space tries and mostly fails to start an OTC desk because they don't know how. They don't know how to provide the support. My question to you, Mr. Adam Goldman, do you think there are more people that believe they own Bitcoin right now than there are in circulation?
That's a great question. Um, Probably.
Yeah, I believe so. I
And
strongly
yeah,
believe so. That's my
yeah.
opinion.
I mean, you look at all these new derivatives and products and things like that, and I would say just based on that alone, absolutely. I also totally agree with you when it comes to OTC being sort of effectively the initial organic back end of the entire crypto market. And what I actually love about how that kind of starts is OTC is effectively the Craigslist beginning
Yeah,
of us exchanging liquidity. It is the Kijiji, it's the Craigslist. It's
it
like,
was all
oh,
handshake too.
yeah, where's your buddy? It's like, oh, okay, we're good. Close, match, spread, done.
Yeah.
And then you deliver the asset, as you said. And yeah, I mean, 10 years on, 13 years on, it just never escapes me when I see one of those, like on Twitter, there's that account Whale Alert, where it's always sort of showing you the super large movement
Sure.
between exchanges and providers. And then I see like a $3 billion one, and it's from Binance, and they do it at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. And to me, that's just, I mean, that says almost all of it right there. Like the rest of the world has really trying to get hung up on things that stare them right in the face about why. And yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing that we're exchanging and storing and moving this type of value as a protocol on the net. I mean, try to move skids of cash, $1 million of
Well,
cash. You can't.
like traditionally, if a company or a government institution organization wants to take a position in something, they want to take a $1 billion position, in a $100 billion thing, or market cap, $1 trillion market cap now. How does someone like Elon Musk do that? Where if he was trying to scale into an asset, and as a hedge fund, you can do that without you know, screwing up the market in a way, because you can get derivatives, you can place options, you can do certain type of orders, you can effectively scale in without sometimes anyone even knowing. But with Bitcoin, you have to take delivery of the actual asset. How do you do that? How do you buy $1 billion? How does someone buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin? Like, what's the process like from a president of an OTC company?
So usually, basically, what the goal would be, and basically the main reason why you want to sort of offer the OTC versus access to the live market through all of our platforms is basically specifically that reason, trying to move into a position with such a large value and not have book slips, market move in either direction. And so I would say that maybe Elon Musk is kind of the asterisk in the box,
Okay,
and
he's
that
asterisk, yeah.
that that he. But I understand the point that how does an enterprise Fortune 500 company that large do that? This is where sort of the beauty of the adoption that we're seeing today in this cycle exists. I mean, the institutional business that is being driven up is absolutely insane. And we see that here as well. We have lots of demand for publicly traded companies, private firms, investment managers, and advisors all looking to get access to these markets. And of course, when they get further and more granular into how does it work, those are some of the top questions. How do we make sure that we're getting, tight spreads, deep liquidity, and whatnot? But then again, this will lead me right back to what you were saying about the OTC conversation, is that there is still in the world of the crypto markets and all of the liquidity of the crypto markets, like a massive dark pool market, prime brokerage type market that exists way behind a lot of the public facing and retail facing desks and platforms. And so I think when it comes to the micro strategies and the Teslas, and I heard another rumor that Oracle might be the next one to jump
I
on
wouldn't be
ship.
surprised, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're contacting desks like ours. They're identifying the type of size that they want to go in, and then it's strategically up to the desk to then source the liquidity throughout the global crypto liquidity markets. And given the fact that the top institutional players sort of have that back end that maybe didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago, it's not as hard as it once was to get that type of exposure and not tilt or flash crash the market in any particular way. And then another thing I think is, just on sort of basic economics and investing, you look at the way that, Mr. Saylor went in with his assets, and it was more of an average type play. And
Yeah,
even though his initial purchase was very big and amounting to that whole balance sheet, I mean, he most recently bought like 5 million and then 12 million before. And those seem like
that's the best way
immaterial.
to do it.
Yeah. And those seem like immaterial amounts in comparison, but it's actually not, because the whole strategy is accumulation of BTC um, on a long-term realm. And so, yeah, I believe
What's
that,
so crazy is that the amounts that they're buying, like I'll see like 1,000 Bitcoin, and that's like a huge
yep.
amount of money. Like I don't know how much money is that. It
Hmm.
depends on the day that this episode gets
Sure.
released. These amounts are like what one customer would buy on BitInstant. Like my friend the other day was like, "Hey Charlie, I remember I bought 3,000 Bitcoin from you.
Right.
Thank you." As he's like showing me his multi-level penthouse,
Thank you.
beautiful
And
penthouse.
now I'll never see you for another 10 years.
The only thing better than making money yourself is when you can make a lot of people a lot of money around the world, and then you just travel, and everyone's so happy all the time. It's
Yeah.
great.
Charlie, come stay with me.
Yeah,
I got you.
exactly. Come and hang out. Do you you're I'm 30. I think we're like around the same age. We both started when we were very, very young. So I can't ask this question a lot. So I'm gonna ask it because do you have any good advice for young startup entrepreneurs? It's such a great question that I can't ask enough.
Sure. I think it really comes down to a few basic things that a lot of people don't really want to admit or realize. And of course, this wisdom came down from my grandfather. And he always said to me, even in the beginning, when he didn't understand Bitcoin, he got maybe burned a little bit on some crypto plays and some investments. But I personally never wanted to give up on it. And I think basically, if you work hard, if you stick with it, and you have patience, I think the law of the universe will reward you. And that's irrespective of crypto or technology or anything. Because when you look at all these stories, most of the success stories begin with a bunch of people telling the initial person they're wrong, they're crazy, it's never going to work. That person then fails 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times. And if they had truly believed what they set out to do and they stuck with it, they'll be rewarded in the end. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of the hardworking
Yeah, I
people
agree.
in crypto. I mean, Charlie, you worked as hard as you ever could to be who you are and where you are, and I would say the exact same thing for myself. And I would just say that not giving up and getting off the horse is the biggest piece of advice.
All right, guys. So, with a pretty crazy, chaotic year behind us, we've got 200 reasons to put your Bitcoin to the test, courtesy of my friends at Bit Casino. And I've gotten you an amazing, amazing offer. You have to go to bitcasino.io/Shrem to get it. But all you have to do is wager 5 MBTC, small amount, wager 5 MBTC or more on Bit Casino on any slot, and you get 200 free spins to their Legacy of Dead game. You get 200 free spins, 200 spins to win more money for free. And all you have to do is do one slot bet. I love these guys. Bit Casino was ahead of the crypto game before that game even got going. The original Bitcoin led online gaming destination. They really, really, really pushed and to continue to set the standard for fun, fast, and fair gameplay because you have the blockchain. You might as well be fair and transparent while you're at it. Deposit, wager, and withdraw in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tron, Litecoin, so many cryptos, all in real time, all the time with Bit Casino. Moving right along. Hey guys, it's Charlie. And remember that time we interviewed Anthony Trenchev from Nexo Finance? Well, they are on a roll right now, offering 5.9% APR on your crypto credit. You'll be able to borrow at less than 6% on some of your crypto. They got a savings account that's offering 12% interest a year. And now they have an integrated exchange so you can trade between all your cryptos without ever leaving their integrated wallet. It's so amazing. Make sure you check it out at nexo.io and start earning interest, start managing your assets, because crypto banking just got real with Nexo. I love that. That's awesome. I love Nexo. It's such a great company. I want you guys to take a moment and check out what the folks and my newest sponsors over at Kava Labs are doing, because up until now, whenever you do anything related to DeFi, like borrowing, lending, loans, bonds, stable coins for Binance, Huobi, Kraken, or all these different places, they actually have been using Kava Labs on the back end. And now you can get those same APYs and those same awesome features that these financial institutions have been getting. You can get them too. All you have to do is go to kava.io and check it out. But on top of that, Kava and Binance, working for International Women's Month, have been launching a $50,000 prize pool that's ending this week. All you have to do is go to Binance or click the link in my show notes. You'll be able to go on there, trade $100. All you do is trade $100 and you get cards that you're entered into drawings that you can get up to $50,000, a part of a prize pool. Make sure you check them out, kava.io. With all your other projects and all my other projects, and then we get into this, is the major difference here the passion. Whereas like here, you don't need to convince people. Like I found very early on that I was wasting my breath trying to bring people over to the Bitcoin side.
Yep.
But then all I would have to do is, as long as I had my normal Charlie passion and the love for this, eventually people saw it. Some people still text me now. It's like years later and they
Yeah.
finally
Hey, are you still doing that Bitcoin thing? It's like,
they see that you're still doing it. And so this advice not only works with and you can use it in good ways and bad ways, but it's and religion has done this, and sometimes for the negative. When you attach your fervor or your passion, other people see that. They want that same and they want to be a part of that.
100%. 100%, Charlie. I definitely am a type of guy who wears my heart on my sleeve, for better, for worse.
Yeah.
And I'm always I've always been passionate about whatever my interests are, and then specifically on crypto. I think, given when I found it, what I had been interested in generally in terms of macro pictures of the world, and then that convergence with the part of me that is a nerd, yeah, it really lit those passions. As as sort of an addendum to this point, I think that my interests beyond technology and crypto are also just history and politics and things like that. And not for any particular reason to get into them, but more from an understanding perspective. And I think the window into history and politics and that macro, and then you watch it converge with where we are in the technologies that we have from
Sure.
the internet to new disruptive technologies. Um, I think it's almost a requirement if you want to try to look that long from something or that deep away from something, because the same narrative of what you and I probably used to tell people when we would sell them into Bitcoin is still true today. And it's even more true today, even if it's a type of taboo statement that nobody wants to hear about liberty and conspiracies or central banks or whatever. It's still true. And so I think, yeah, the passion probably comes from a understanding that we were able to obtain a lot sooner than a lot of other people. And then, of course, when you manifest your passion, people can be drawn to that. And I would say a lot of people in my orbit definitely took a chance on that part as well. Just, wow, you're so passionate about this. Why are you so gung ho and nutty about magic
Someone
internet
comes to
money?
you and says, like, Adam, Bitcoin is a religion and you're just replacing one for another. How do you respond to
Hmm.
that?
That's a pretty philosophical
Well, do you think
question.
it's a positive or a negative? Like, do you immediately feel defensive or are you like, yeah, I agree with that?
Um, I mean, let rephrase the question again, just so
When
I can.
I read an article the other day by Joe Weisenthal. He wrote it for Bloomberg, and he was just like
Okay.
vilifying Bitcoin as a religion.
Yeah.
And he was,
Sure. Okay, I got your point.
and I was like reading this with joy because I'm saying to myself, that's a good thing. What's wrong with people coming together and having a decentralized religion? That's a powerful thing. And but he wrote it in a very negative way. And I'd like to
Sure.
talk to other Bitcoiners and ask the same question.
Sure. Sure. I think actually it's interesting that you read that article. I think a couple weeks ago, I was looking at a tweet thread between Pomp and Raoul Paul,
Mm,
and they were sort of arguing over, um, how Bitcoiners and a lot of us crypto folk love sort of the memery, and the humor and the cynicism of our success and comedy and whatnot.
Mm.
And Raul is making a great point. Like, you should not be thumbing this in people's noses. You shouldn't be gloating. You shouldn't be all this. And then Pomp is simply responding, and Pomp makes the point accurately. And it's like, you're kind of missing the point about the meme and the humor. And I think this kind of ties a little bit into the religion aspect, is that um, that energy component, which is required in religions and when you have passion and things like that, is actually a much stronger point than he is willing to admit. And that's why his defense against it is, when we say things like have fun staying poor, he's literally taking that meme that comes from crypto and saying it as if we're literally saying to people, have fun staying poor, you ass, like
Yeah.
in a negative way. And that's not what the energy of that meme is supposed to come. And I think I'm just trying to use that as an
No,
example
it's
to go,
brilliant. It's brilliant.
yeah, yeah, that, what I would say, yeah, maybe the Bloomberg article says, the negative elements of what religion can do in a negative fashion, but to your point, like the half full way to look at that is decentralized religion, positive. There's actually more people to share and exchange and
Yeah.
compromise and whatnot. And yeah, I think I think if I read that article, I would respond with the Abe Simpson meme that says "old man yells at Bitcoin." And again, that's the meme
Yes.
of our religion right back in the same point.
I completely agree. And so like I would read that you look at that meme and it's not like have fun staying poor you ass. It's like, hey, like look at what we're doing and how we're bringing people out of poverty. Check
Correct.
this out, read about it. Don't be so negative. And then unfortunately, we need to be tongue in cheek to do that. I mean,
Correct.
go
Well,
read it.
that's the landscape we've been forced to exist in today.
If any reporter would go read on a given day the Bitcoin IRC developer mailing list, they probably think that we're fighting all the time,
Of course.
but we're not. It's just how we all communicate with each other.
Yep.
We're looking back now, and it's like, wait, maybe we should take that a step back. But I don't know. I don't think
You
so.
know, let me add one more point. One thing I've actually noticed, given the whole new charged political discourse we've been living in for the last, I don't know, 8, 15 years. I would say that one thing I notice about crypto is it's such a unifier, and it's such a unifier to the degree that all these different political ideologies can actually come together around
Yes,
crypto and
it's
speak about
crazy.
crypto and drop the politics on a agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And I find that remarkable in such a toxic environment that we live in. And I find it so cool because I see all these different subsections of social communities now going full crypto. And it has nothing to do with anything other than the same reasons everybody else who loves crypto got into it: the liberty aspects, the freedom aspects, the decentralized aspects, the privacy aspects. Like it's
But
amazing.
what it's doing is it's giving bipartisanship in a way where we all want the same things. We just kind of disagreed on how to do that.
Yep.
And so you're right, it's pretty cool how like look at Florida has a blockchain advisory council. And if you look at who's on it, it's a bunch of elected politicians. The most like Democrats, Republicans, completely
Hmm.
opposite. But I'm
Hmm.
friends with a lot of these people. The mayor of Miami is on the
Sure.
board. The CFO of the state. I can't call them friends yet because we have I don't know them well enough, but they're
Yeah.
friendly acquaintances. But
I believe they will be soon, Charlie. So there's no
yeah,
doubt on that.
hopefully I talked to them all, and it's like that whole like hostility of the past 4 years, it just melts away.
Melts away. And I find that unbelievable in terms of crypto. That there's so many things that I think we will actually net benefit as a result of this decentralized technology that will help solve some of these, social issues that seem to plague
Why
everybody's
don't we
head.
have a voting block? How come you don't see we have lobby
You
groups in DC, I'm sure, all over the world you have them.
it's so ironic when it comes back to the lobbying, right? Because it's almost like the ethos of crypto in and of itself is to do away with such, middlemen or middle persons or women or
Sure.
whatever. And and you know, I think obviously the reality is why there is lobbying that has to exist. There's lobbying everywhere, as there should be, because from crypto people in the industry, we have a goal to make those who don't understand, especially if it's at such a detriment to fostering the continued growth of like all of our visions combined, right?
Sure.
And so obviously the banks need to wake up, and the regulators need to wake up, and the insurance companies need to wake up, and they all need to stop poo-poo-pooing and reading Janet Yellen and Jay Powell, and actually go and read more from the fire hose that is crypto Twitter is stage one. I mean, my 65-year-old dad is on crypto Twitter, and like he uses it better than I do. Like in terms of like he's getting all these signals,
Yes,
to
and
make
that's what they're
moves.
not doing. The biggest
Yes.
fear of the administrations and the economies and the economists of today is that they're reading and making policy based on their view that it's single humans and committees that make decisions for the betterment of said economies. But really, the way the world they should be reading the books and following Twitter and seeing that no, these are masses like oceans, and these masses of people cycle and we move and our money moves with it.
It's unbelievable.
And sometimes you can't control that. And then when you try to control it and you can't, it fucks it up even more.
Hmm.
And more people get poor. That's what we see these days. People will look at it just sucks because 10 years from now, they're gonna look back and they're gonna say, whoever, history is written by the victor, but they're gonna say that the government policies made people poor
Sure.
during this COVID. And it's a shame.
I totally agree. Without getting too deep into it, I mean, plain on its face, you can ask yourself the question, why did Ma and Pa hardware store have to be closed? But, big box Home Depot is no problem. Why couldn't Ma and Pa have five people in the store at a time, space it out, have a
It's all about
lineup?
centralization.
Centralization,
If
exactly.
governments had their way, they'd be one grocery store, there'd be one
Yep.
bank, there'd be
Hmm.
one. Why do you think it's so hard to deregulate industries?
Sure.
Energy, banking. Dude, I was talking to a friend who started an airline after the deregulation of the airline industry in the United States. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But you
Hmm.
look at 2008, 2009, remember during the
Hmm.
crazy financial crisis?
Absolutely.
You would think that these big banks get punished, right? No. What happens is the government says, hey, big banks that fucked up and made all the bad decisions, you need to go and buy out the smaller banks who you fucked
Hmm.
over.
Hmm.
And then you have to have a consolidation. So now there are probably like four banks that own every other bank in probably all of North America.
It's the 2008 reference point I think is sort of a great one when a lot of the quote unquote untold stories in crypto get
Sure.
told, because for me personally, I've sort of a couple of years just past the end of leaving university, and of course during those times the zeitgeist documentaries and all of those documentaries were making their rounds on the DC plus plus university networks and whatnot, and I be, back to me sort of having that interest in politics and history in general, it was almost like that plus the '08 crash, plus the improvements of our internet technology a decade on from the dot com sort of start. Um, it was a perfect storm. It was a perfect primer to be in that time, like just finishing obtaining all that information about how these elephant in the room taboo items like secret societies and central banks and all of this stuff that nobody wants to talk about. But just having been primed that, and then the series of events that would follow in terms of economics and who would become president and what our a political discourse would be like, it's guys, people like us were able to see through the lines when it came to, wow, this crypto is really cool. Like I was just so
Mm,
fascinated by it, like giddy like a toy, when I was like, wow, what is this Bitcoin? And me and the other co-founder of BitBy, who's a brilliant PhD in mathematics, Adam Gonzalez, he just had such a attraction to it, both
mhm,
philosophically, ideologically, and then of course with that convergence of tech. So yeah, I think it's almost like you look back at sort of the way our governments have acted in the last 10 or 15 years, and it's not an accident that Bitcoin is now here.
I would love to get a bunch of people to pledge a certain amount of money or something to start a Bitcoin social think tank where we can
Totally.
just research and look back on the history of money, the history of Bitcoin, and really like that whole social layer of it, mathematical, philosophical layer, because I miss these conversations. And when you're like in the weeds of it and walking and talking and working, you forget that. Like what you
Sure.
just said, like I fell in love with Bitcoin from a mathematical but more philosophical perspective. I would love to
Well,
see that.
one of the things that I find interesting too is like, when the whole Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks thing, and because that has had such a deep connection to, privacy and freedom of information and whatnot. And then, me, I think for my own personal, just being such a tech person and being so enthralled with the technological side of what the NSAs and the intelligence communities were doing, um, that it only sought to ideologically, um, create a want in my head that it's like, wow, how do I get that liberty back that I've lost to this world and these systems where the mediums are all different, because the medium is the internet, the medium are computer systems and networks.
Exactly.
And so yeah, it was like a light, like everybody who thought that, the light went off instantly. And then it was a function of how the heck am I going to be part of this new world? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those
Speaking
talks are the best. I
oh,
love them.
speaking of new world, do you think? And I had to Google the term watershed because I never really understood what it meant. But do you think
Oh, I'm gonna have to also. Yeah, go ahead.
I understood that it meant like a turning point, but I didn't know what a watershed was. And apparently, a watershed is
Sure.
a ridge of land that separates two water systems. So effectively, when you're saying like something is a watershed moment or a turning point, it's when a water system that we know as the most unchanging things changes. Uh,
Yep.
so I guess, do you think that the Coinbase IPO is like crypto's next Bitcoin's Netscape moment or like the watershed moment that we'll have? Because just because Coinbase was like the
I
first
think I
real
think it's
company.
a I think it's a huge moment, no doubt. I think it's almost like the end of chapter one, and maybe it's not fair to say
Oh
that the
no, I like that.
last
You're right.
it's not maybe fair to put all of the last 13 years into one chapter. But if, let's say, it was as simple as, how do we get the world to wake up? And it took 13 years to get to now, and it culminates in one of the foremost and strongest companies and marketplaces to get out there and be in the public sphere, and then have all the support of the traditional world behind it. I think it definitely has the capacity to be a new watershed moment. Um, but it's hard from a technical perspective to say, does the Coinbase listing provide the same watershed moment as, like, you know, Satoshi publishing the white
Yeah,
paper,
good point.
or the first transaction to HAL, or anything like that. And but yeah, I think if I put it in the context of that ends the chapter, the new chapter begins with Coinbase's listing. I think yes, it can bring us
So
into
you can
the
have
whole
multiple
new.
watershed moments in your life,
Correct,
essentially.
correct. That's sort of probably where
That's
I'd
a
put it.
that's a great response. Maybe like
Yeah.
if I ever write
and
this.
I've always like, one of our missions at BitBy is, was to provide that feel in Canada that Coinbase has provided to its customers, in the United States and elsewhere around the world. And it's definitely been a leader. I mean, despite, what people say about it being premium here or this there, I mean, there's literally, um, you know a handful of machines like that went that deep and that far and for that long to really be so in tune with what their mission and goal is, and they've more than succeeded in doing that, and influencing and inspiring other companies in other markets around the world to do
Yeah,
just the same. and
yeah.
and we've been told that
Shining
as a
city on the
flattering thing
hill.
that we're like a Canadian Coinbase. And I, I bow to that when somebody says
It's a
that,
great
because
compliment.
yeah, it's absolutely.
I'm not gonna bring up all the the terms that I've been called and where I thought they were compliments, but they ended up not being. But Adam
You
Goldman.
know what? And Charlie, all I have to say to whatever that is they were all wrong.
No, I know they were, they were, because you know what it was. My watershed moment, and I'll never forget, of my life was not when I was arrested. It was not when certain things happened. My watershed moment was when I decided to take control of my own future. And that meant for me packing up all my worldly possessions that I owned in my car and leaving my family. And why I had to do that was a whole nother, for another podcast series even. But yeah, everyone has those watershed moments in their life that they look back on, some points with positivity, negativity, or whatever it is. But I have no regrets. And when you have no regrets, it leads a happy life. So I hope I can wish that on everyone who listens is to lead a life where you have no regrets.
100%.
Adam, thank you.
Interesting last point on that. I read also something that somebody shared about sort of what was part of Jeff Bezos' success, and it was exactly that. It was the regret minimization framework, where he would simply, am I going to regret this in 10 years, 5 years, 20 years? And it's a
Sometimes you
great way
have to make the shitty decision so
Yep,
you don't regret it later. And it's like
absolutely.
sometimes my wife and I will be in those decision moments and I'll be like, Court, we have to do this because even something so stupid like Phil. Phil was here and our mutual friend Phil, and we
Yep.
had just traveled, Courtney and I would just traveled to Puerto Rico for business and we're tired and wanted to come back to Sarasota. And Phil said, come to Miami for my birthday. And Phil and I are very, very good friends. And I said, Court, I don't want to go. I'm tired. And she's like, we're going to look back and regret this if we don't go, as much as we don't want to go. Because here, Charlie, I know how hard it is for you to make friends and you have someone who wants to be who likes you for you. So, don't regret that. And so it's sometimes simple decisions like that.
Amazing.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Charlie, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.